Welcome back. This video covers a few of those odd jobs that we had to take care of in the month of November 2018. Rough plumbing was one of those few jobs that I was able to successfully sub out. Here you can see that they just run the PEX pipe through the dirt under the slab. Hopefully we never need to fix anything, but they seem pretty confident about it. Then they went and organized all the tubes in the mechanical room. They ended up running them all across the ceiling. As an engineer, I'm not a big fan of manifolds because I assume that they restrict flow. But the plumbers seem to think they'd be fine. I guess they're not the bottleneck of the system, usually the faucet itself is. The biggest hassle for the plumbers was that the quad deck ceiling only let them attach along those steel reinforcements, but that isn't so different from a wood joist ceiling. They had only brought wood screws with them, so I gave them a box of self-tapping metal screws and they were good to go. I actually ended up telling them that I liked the look of that ceiling so much I might not even bother to finish it over. They were good guys to work with and all that, and after spending some time learning from them, I ended up buying myself a PEX crimp tool, and I'll be using that from now on. No more glued PVC or shark bite connectors for me. I'll probably do a lot of the finished plumbing myself. I'm pretty confident about that now, and we'll see how that all goes. As for the electrical, we had taken a bunch of bids, but they were ridiculous. I ended up just doing it myself, and I'll probably get the rough-in done for about 1/10 of the lowest bid that we got. Here we're starting by cleaning up some of the rubble that was on the floor so that we can bury the electrical conduit more easily. The rubble here is chunks of stucco or concrete or shotcrete that had ended up in the sand. We also needed that floor to be flattened anyway just for adding insulation the next step. Then we just laid out the EMT conduit, also known as Smurf tube. The hardest part was that it had been coiled up and it kept wanting to return to that coiled shape, and we were trying to get it to stay where we buried it and kept popping out of the dirt. That stack in the middle will come up in an interior wall that will be there at some future point. For now it's just a piece of basalt rebar that I shoved in the sand just to hold things still. There's no wire in this conduit yet, we'll pull the wires through later. We didn't film it all, but we ran these sorts of tubes all over the house, including extra ones that we might use for communications, wiring, or fiber optics, or who knows what in the future. These picks are some tubes and pipes that go from the basement to the kitchen. I also had to run a bigger Smurf tube from the panel to the hot water heater to carry all those wires. Now that the roof gunite was on, we also wanted to close things up as much as possible. So I added a back door to close off that mudroom. We chose that arch top window in the door because it hints at the vault shape of the mudroom that it opens into. We still had a giant hole in the center of the house, so I made a temporary skylight to cover that giant tower hole. It wasn't a perfect seal or anything like that, but it kept the snow, the wind, and most of the weather out. Here's some fun sunset pics. After finishing up that gunite job in the last video, we can also take away the bracing that's under the quad deck that formed that mezzanine roof. This part was pretty easy peasy. Then to the outside of that south wall after finishing that gunite. Here you can see that Sherry had already waterproofed the bottom edge of the wall, and now I need to add a French drain and some insulation. The drain is just a piece of corrugated perforated tube and pea stone wrapped in landscaper's fabric to keep the sand and roots and stuff from getting inside. This is just one of many drains that we've put around this house. Then I wanted to put a little frost protection for the footings, so I used this 25 psi insulation that I got very cheaply at a Black Friday sale. I put a little plastic on top just to keep some of the water off, but I didn't expect or need it to be waterproofed, especially with that drain right below it. This layer of insulation just forces the heat to take a longer path through the earth before it can escape the envelope of the home. It's the equivalent of burying the house more deeply. Basically keeps energy in the home and prevents the frost from forming near the footings where it can cause problems for the concrete, jacking, other issues like that. Here I had started out expecting to use the tractor for most of the dirt work, but it was gutless. The bucket and all that could lift, no problem, but I just couldn't really move it forward. I blamed the hydrostatic transmission and ended up using a shovel. The next day I was using the tractor and Sherry noticed something strange while I was trying to drive around. As soon as the tractor faced any resistance, such as here it's just going up the slightest incline, the hub would just turn inside the tire. But from up in the seat, I couldn't see that hub turning. I could only see the tire not turning, so I thought it was a transmission problem. I looked it up online, and I saw that some people suggested screwing the tire to the rim, like with metal tapping screws, but I opted for just taking it off, cleaning that sidewall, and putting it back on again. Maybe the previous guy had put on too much tire bead lubricant or something like that. And actually, once I let the air out, I decided I could clean up the bead without even taking the tire off. I figured there was a reason that previous guy had used all that lubricant, and I would rather just avoid trying to put the tire back on if I could. After this shot, I put down the camera and I cleaned that rim very well, till it was literally squeaky clean. But then when I came time to put air back in the tire, I couldn't get the tire to rebead. The air kept leaking out around the rim. So I'd heard about this old ratchet strap trick where you use a ratchet strap to just hold that tire pressure up against the rim. So I tried that and it worked. It worked perfectly. So after the tire was inflated and put back on, I got it outside and the tire is fine now. The wheel turns properly, but the hydraulics were leaking. So I've replaced probably about a third of the hydraulic tubes on the back of this tractor. I guess I got another one or two here to fix. Well, now we're getting into some more serious winter. I'm sure we'll have lots of fun working inside over the winter, and I'll get to going on the next video.